I remember the exact moment I saw the email. It was a Thursday morning just after 9 a.m., and I was still clutching a half-empty coffee I didn't even remember pouring. I'd barely slept. My hair was pulled into something that resembled a bun, my blouse was wrinkled, and I had 3 unread messages from Nathan, already blinking at me in red. Same as always, but then I saw the subject line, "Thank you, Julia, enjoy the game." My stomach flipped. The sender was my client, a major one. The kind of client firms chase for years and rarely land. I had closed the deal myself. Me. Not with hand-holding, not by smiling through golf rounds or cocktail dinners. I did it with late-night spreadsheets, strategy calls, and sheer stubborn will. I clicked the email. 2 tickets, Super Bowl, 40-yard line, front row. Front row. I just stared. My hands actually shook. I'd never been to a Super Bowl. I'd never even dared to hope to go. And now, here it was, a direct thank you. Not to my team, not to the firm, to me. "Julia, you went above and beyond. Consider these a personal thank you. Enjoy the game." I read that line maybe 5 times. Then I printed it. Just to have something to hold in my hands, something real. I'd been running on fumes and self-discipline for 4 straight months. My friends had stopped inviting me out. My cat barely remembered who I was. I ate meals at my desk and dreamed in Excel formulas. And this was the first time in years someone saw it. Acknowledged it. Not with a nice work and a performance review, but with something real. I imagined walking into the stadium, feeling the roar of the crowd, letting go for once, laughing. That was the first and last moment I allowed myself to feel purely happy about it. 3 days later, Nathan walked into my office. No knock, no smile. Just that smug, casual arrogance, like he owned the air I breathed. He leaned on the edge of my desk, crossed his arms, and said, "I heard you got some great news." I smiled. Finally, I thought. He's going to hand me the tickets. Maybe say something rare and semi-human, like well-deserved. "Yeah," I said. I was really surprised but grateful. He nodded slowly. "You did great on that account. Which is why I wanted to talk to you about the tickets." Something in his tone made my pulse flicker. I tried to keep my face neutral. "Right," I said carefully. Nathan exhaled, like this was hard for him. Like this conversation was a burden he had to carry. "Thing is," he said, "clients don't always understand how things work internally. They don't see the chain of command, the structure. When they gave you those tickets, that was really more of a gift to the firm, not just to you." I blinked. "But the email?" "I get it," he said, waving a hand like I was being emotional. "But in this business, it's about optics, relationships. We have to make strategic decisions, so I'll be taking the tickets." I didn't speak. I couldn't. The room felt like it tilted. "I'm taking a potential investor," he added casually, like it was already done. "It's a good play for all of us." My heart was pounding. Not just from rage, from disbelief. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening, after everything. "That's not fair," I said quietly, each word carefully chosen, even though I wanted to scream. He smiled like I was adorable. "You should be grateful you have a job, Julia. That's the real reward here." I sat frozen, gripping the arms of my chair so hard my fingers hurt. He patted my desk like I was some pet who needed soothing. "Don't worry, you'll have other opportunities." I don't know what came over me next, but I smiled. Not a real smile. The kind of smile that holds a blade behind it. "Well, I said enjoy the game." He smirked, turned, and strolled out of my office like he'd just done something noble. He had no idea what he'd just done. He thought he was taking 2 tickets. He had just handed me the key to his downfall. The second Nathan left my office, I stopped smiling. My jaw clenched so tight it ached. My hands were balled into fists under my desk, fingernails pressing into my palms. I sat there for a full minute, barely breathing. I wasn't just angry, I was humiliated. Like I'd been slapped in public and forced to thank the person who did it. I pulled up the email again, the one from the client. Read the words like they might have changed. A personal thank you, my name, my effort. And Nathan had taken it. Claimed it as some strategic play. Spun a lie that suited his ego, wrapped it in the illusion of authority, and delivered it to my face like it was a favor. I could have marched into his office. I could have gone straight to HR. But I'd been at this firm long enough to know how that would play out. Nathan was protected, connected. He played golf with the managing partner and took calls during lunch from people who wrote checks with 6 zeros. No, if I went head-on, I'd lose. But if I played it right, he'd take himself down. So I started with a simple move. A seed. I texted the client. Hey, just wanted to say thanks again for the tickets. Turns out they were redirected internally. Hope to catch up soon. It was polite, barely accusatory, just enough to raise a question. He replied almost instantly. Redirected who took them. I stared at the screen for a second, then typed, not sure, just never received them. No big deal, though. There was a pause. Then, no big deal, Julia, those were meant for you. Let me handle this. Say nothing. My chest loosened, just slightly. He was pissed, and now he knew. I didn't know what he'd do with that information, and honestly, I didn't care, not yet, because the moment I pressed send, the power balance shifted. It wasn't just me versus Nathan anymore. It was Nathan versus the person he was trying to impress. I didn't need revenge. I needed exposure. And Nathan, God bless his arrogant little heart, was going to provide it himself. All I had to do was wait. That week, I watched him like a scientist tracking an overconfident lab rat. I listened. I gathered. By Thursday, he was buzzing with excitement, talking louder than usual, bragging in the break room. Yeah, he said, laughing over his overpriced coffee. Front row, 40-yard line. It's gonna be wild. Taking a potential investor, real big fish. I stood around the corner out of sight, biting the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. A big fish. Sure, Nathan. I knew exactly who he was taking. His brother-in-law, an unemployed ex-entrepreneur who once tried to sell keto brownies on Etsy. Nathan thought appearances would save him. That if he sounded like he was making big moves, no one would question it. He didn't realize that when the client asked where I was at the game, he wouldn't have an answer. On Friday, the office buzzed with weekend chatter. People laughed in the hallways. Nathan packed up early, wheeling his sleek suitcase through the glass doors like a rock star boarding his private jet. Big weekend, I asked as he passed by. He grinned. Just building relationships, I smiled back. Enjoy the game. And I meant it, because by the time he landed, everything was already in motion. Saturday morning, I got a text from the client. Meeting set for Monday. Just play it cool. Trust me. I stared at it for a long time. My heart thumped. Monday. I didn't know what was going to happen in that meeting, but I knew one thing: it wouldn't be quiet. I didn't watch the Super Bowl that Sunday, not even a minute of it. It hurt too much. It wasn't about football. It was about the principle. The theft. The idea that someone could rip away the one thing I'd earned with blood and time and still expect me to smile about it. I spent the night cleaning my apartment, scrubbing, folding, reorganizing drawers I hadn't touched in months. Anything to distract myself from the twist in my stomach. The silence wasn't just in the room, it was inside me. But underneath it, something else stirred something calmer. A cold confidence. This time I wasn't going to let it pass. Monday morning. I arrived early, earlier than usual. I wore black, clean lines, sharp shoulders. The kind of outfit that doesn't ask for respect, it assumes it. Nathan strolled in at 9:07, sunglasses on iced coffee, in hand, still basking in his imagined brilliance. He didn't even glance at me as he passed my desk. At 9:30 sharp, the meeting invite popped up. Client review, mandatory. Attendees, Nathan Rourke, Julia Stanton, client guest. Guest. My stomach fluttered. I clicked accept. When I walked into the glass-walled conference room, the air was already different. Nathan was seated at the head of the table, relaxed, legs crossed, confident. The client sat across from him, expression unreadable. Next to him, a woman, early 40s, polished blazer steel in her posture. Julia, the client said, motioning to the chair beside him. Glad you could join us. I nodded and sat. Nathan smiled fake and smooth. Let's get started. But the client held up a hand. Before we dive into today's agenda, he said, quick question. He turned to me. Julia, did you enjoy the game? The room froze. Nathan's smile cracked. I tilted my head. The game. The Super Bowl. I blinked, playing innocent. Oh, I didn't go. The shift in the room was instant. The client's face darkened. That's strange. Because I personally arranged for you to have 2 seats, delivered them directly to your firm. Nathan jumped in too fast. Right, well, there was a bit of a mix-up. The client cut him off. So who went? Nathan hesitated. I took a client. The woman next to the client, who I now realized was a VP of corporate partnerships, leaned forward. Just to clarify, she said, her voice like a scalpel. You accepted tickets explicitly gifted to an employee and used them for someone else without authorization. Nathan swallowed. The client didn't wait. I was looking forward to seeing Julia there, he said as a celebration of the months of work she put into this account. Imagine my surprise when I found out she wasn't even invited. The silence that followed was thick, and I didn't say a word. Nathan tried to laugh it off. I watched his eyes dart around the room, looking for a lifeline. No one offered one. His usual fake charm had nowhere to land. The VP, her name was Andrea, tapped a pen once on her notebook and said, "Did you expense this trip, Mr. Rourke?" He blinked. Yes, of course. It was for business. She tilted her head. So just to be absolutely clear, you expensed a trip meant as a personal gift to an employee, used it for a non-client, and recorded it as a business expense. Nathan's voice caught. I took a potential investor. The client leaned forward. Who? What? Name the investor, he said, arms now crossed. Because I didn't see anyone from your guest list registered at our networking events. And our VP here, he gestured to Andrea, has cross-checked guest affiliations. Nathan opened and closed his mouth. And then it happened, that flicker. That microscopic moment of truth. He knew he was caught. And he knew we knew it too. He tried one last pivot. It was my brother-in-law, he admitted. But look, he's considering entering the market, and I thought. The client sat back, hands folded. Do you honestly think I believe you took your unemployed brother-in-law to the Super Bowl as a business move? Andrea added calmly. You didn't just steal recognition from a high-performing employee. You falsified an expense report and violated ethics policy. Frankly, I'm surprised this is your first time being confronted. That one hit him hard. Nathan was quiet. He couldn't even fake his way through it anymore. I stayed silent, not because I didn't have things to say I did, but because I didn't need to say them. Everyone else was finally speaking the truth I'd been swallowing for years. The client turned to Andrea. You'll be handling internal response. She nodded, expression unreadable, effective immediately. Nathan's face paled. He opened his mouth again, probably to beg, maybe to threaten, but nothing came out. It didn't matter. He had already lost. And I just sat there, hands folded in my lap, not smiling, not smug, just steady. Finally, the meeting ended with Andrea sliding a folder across the table to me. Julia, she said, since you're already doing the majority of the work on this account, and the client has expressed a preference, we'd like to formally offer you a promotion. I blinked. A promotion. I opened the folder. A new title, a serious raise. Project lead over 2 additional accounts. My signature was the only thing missing. I looked up stunned. Are you serious? Andrea didn't blink. You've more than earned it. The client added, next time I get Super Bowl tickets, they're coming straight to you. I laughed. I couldn't help it. I shook his hand, the promotion folder still half open under my other arm. Nathan stood by the door, awkward, frozen, a ghost in real time. His world had just collapsed, and no one was going to help him rebuild it. I didn't look at him when I walked out. I didn't need to. Back at my desk, the ripple effect hit instantly. People noticed. Nathan's office glass door, cracked open, was completely empty. A paper sign taped to the glass office, reserved for reassignment. Emails trickled in, Slack messages, pings. Did something happen? Are you okay? Did he really? I didn't respond to most of them. I just sat staring at the new job offer, still unsigned, and let it sink in. I won. But the weirdest part, it didn't feel like victory. Not yet. It felt like balance. An hour later, a new email appeared in my inbox. Subject: immediate HR attendance required. I read it twice. No message body. Just a time and location. I frowned. That had Nathan's fingerprints all over it. When I walked into the HR room, Denise, one of the only decent people left in that department, looked visibly uncomfortable. Nathan was already seated across the table, jacket, off sleeves, rolled hands, steepled like he was about to perform some legal jujitsu. Julia, he said almost kindly. Have a seat. I didn't reply. I sat quietly. Denise cleared her throat. Robert, excuse me, Nathan has brought forward a concern. Of course he had. I didn't want to do this, Nathan said, shaking his head, like this was hard for him. But I believe Julia may have breached internal confidentiality protocols by discussing firm business with an external client. I blinked. That was the play. That client, he went on, wasn't authorized to receive internal communications about how we allocate gifts or structure decision-making. I let out the smallest, most bitter laugh. So just to clarify, you're saying the email I responded to about my tickets was confidential. Denise looked down, then back at him. We reviewed the thread. Julia didn't disclose financials, no sensitive strategy, no NDAs, just a message of gratitude and confusion. He shifted, but it caused reputational damage. To whom I said, silence. Let's call this what it is, I added. You got caught. Now you're trying to flip the narrative because it's the only card you have left. Denise didn't say anything for a second. Then she nodded. Nathan, unless you have something substantial to add, I think this concludes our meeting. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. He just sat there cornered, trapped in the silence he used to weaponize against others. And then Denise said, Julia, you're free to go. I stood up, calm, dignified, walked to the door without even glancing his way. By the time I sat back down at my desk, another email had gone out company-wide. Effective immediately, Nathan Rourke is no longer with the firm. We wish him the best in his future endeavors. I read it twice, slowly, letting each word land. Then I finally smiled. A real one this time. That night, I got one last message. Unknown number. Enjoy your little victory. You just got lucky. I stared at the screen. I didn't even hesitate. Luck had nothing to do with it. Then I blocked the number. The morning after Nathan was fired, I woke up before my alarm. It wasn't adrenaline. It wasn't anxiety. It was quiet. For the first time in months, maybe years, my body wasn't bracing for impact. I still got dressed like I always did. Still took the same train. Still walked into the same lobby, past the same receptionist, who now gave me a look that was somewhere between damn and are you okay? I was okay. I just wasn't sure how long I wanted to be here. The firm had promoted me. That was real. But it didn't come from recognition. It came from exposure, from a public unraveling that left them no choice. I wasn't elevated. I was reacted to. And that sat with me longer than I expected. All day, people passed my desk tossing out nervous jokes or whispered congrats. You played that well. Glad someone finally said something. Never liked that guy anyway. I smiled where I had, to nodded when it was safe. But inside, I wasn't celebrating. I was calculating. Late that afternoon, I got a call. Blocked number. I picked up. Julia, the client, said the one who had sent the tickets. I assume you've seen the news? I leaned back. Yeah, it's been a day. He chuckled. Don't thank me for what happened. That man burned his own career down. You just handed him the match. I didn't say anything. But then his tone shifted. Let me ask you something. Are you happy staying where you are? I blinked. Excuse me. Your firm promoted you because they had to. Not because they wanted to. They tolerated you until they couldn't deny you. He wasn't wrong. I didn't respond, so he continued. I've watched you work for over a year now. You're smart, strategic. You don't let people bulldoze you. That's exactly the kind of person I want building strategy in-house. I sat up straighter. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you freedom, and double your current salary. I froze. Double. He let the silence stretch. You've proven you can manage chaos. But what could you build if you weren't constantly fighting for your place? That question sat in my chest like a brick. I told him I needed a day. But deep down I already knew. That night, I walked around my apartment in a fog. I stood in front of my mirror and asked myself something I hadn't asked in years. What do you want? Not what's safe, not what looks good, not what earns you gold stars and maybe one day a partner title if the right men retire. But what do you want, Julia? I didn't have a clean answer, but I knew it wasn't this. So the next morning I printed the offer. Read it 3 times. Signed it. Then I printed my resignation letter. Walking into HR felt surreal. Denise looked up from her desk and tilted her head. Didn't expect to see you so soon. I handed her the envelope. She opened it, read the first few lines, then flipped to the back page. She saw the number. Her eyebrows shot up. Jesus! I laughed. Yeah, she nodded, almost impressed. I can't blame you. I packed my office in less than 30 minutes. Some people came by, some surprised, others not. A few whispered things like, take me with you, or you were always too smart for this place. I didn't say much, just smiled. Right before I left, I got one last message. Unknown number again. Enjoy your little victory. You just got lucky. I stared at it for a beat. then replied, "Luck had nothing to do with it," blocked the number, and walked out. Starting at the new company felt like stepping into oxygen. No power plays, no petty games, no constant low-level fear that someone would steal your ideas or make you small so they could feel big. I was given a team, a real one, and not because I begged for it, because it made sense. People asked me questions and actually listened to my answers. My first presentation wasn't filtered through 5 levels of bureaucracy. It went straight to the top, and they approved it without changing a word. I started sleeping again. Real sleep. Not the kind where your brain wakes you at 3 a.m., wondering if you forgot to blind copy someone important. And slowly my posture changed. My voice, my pace. I didn't apologize as much. I didn't ask for permission when I knew I was right. I became the version of myself I always had under the surface, the one Nathan saw and tried to suppress, the one who didn't shrink. 6 months in, I got invited to speak at a leadership summit. I almost said no. Then I remembered how many rooms I'd been silenced in, how many meetings I was asked to take notes instead of speak. So I said yes, and I told the truth. Not the scandal, not the headlines, but what it's like to build something in the shadows while people like Nathan take the credit. What it's like to finally choose yourself and walk. The applause caught me off guard. So did the women who waited afterward, not for photos, but to say thank you. That was when it hit me. This wasn't just a comeback. It was a reclamation, and I wasn't going back. Not ever. A year later, I stood in my corner office, coffee in hand, looking out over the skyline. The nameplate on the door read Julia Stanton, Director of Strategic Development. The view was incredible, but the best part wasn't the office or the title or even the salary. It was the silence. No second-guessing, no subtle disrespect, no tension clawing under the surface of every meeting, just peace. That morning, as sunlight cut across the edge of my desk, I did what I always did, skimmed the news over coffee. My assistant had dropped off the print edition circled in pen. Front page of the business section. Former executive Nathan Rourke sues firm over wrongful termination. I blinked. Then I laughed, out loud. I hadn't thought about Nathan in months. Not really. I assumed he'd taken a buyout laid low, maybe wormed his way into some new firm that didn't Google thoroughly. But here he was, still trying to win a battle that ended a year ago. I read the article. It was everything I expected. Vague claims, exaggerated credentials, accusations of internal politics, the classic cancellation speech dressed up in legalese. He wasn't suing because he was wronged. He was suing because he'd been exposed. I set the paper down, took a sip of my coffee, and smiled. About a week later, I ran into someone from my old firm. Not in a dramatic coffee shop scene, just a quiet encounter at a networking mixer, one of those half-obligatory, half-free wine kind of events. Her name was Tasha, smart, sharp, mid-level manager, who had once told me she felt like a ghost in her own department. She walked over slowly, glass in hand. "Julia," I smiled. "Hey." She looked me up and down, not in a jealous way, just taking it all in. "You look different." "I sleep now," I said. She laughed. "We heard about Nathan's lawsuit. It's wild." I nodded, desperate. She leaned in. "People still talk about what you did." "What I did?" I raised an eyebrow. She smirked. "They call it the Stanton pivot. Silent surgical and career-ending." I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my drink. She smiled. "I just wanted to say, watching you leave gave a lot of us permission to think about leaving too." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just said thank you. Not long after, I got a LinkedIn message from someone I didn't recognize. "Hi, Julia. I'm a junior associate at your former firm. I read about what happened. Just wanted to say thank you for standing up when the rest of us couldn't." That one stayed with me, because that's what it really was. I hadn't torched the building. I hadn't screamed in boardrooms or stormed out with boxes. I had stood up, and I hadn't flinched. No, every now and then, I'd get a text from someone who still worked at the firm, usually vague updates. The leadership team's reshuffling again. 3 clients jumped ship after Nathan's story hit the news. They still haven't filled your role permanently. I didn't feel smug about it. Just detached. Like I'd finally realized how small the room was that I used to think was the whole world. One afternoon, while prepping for a quarterly board meeting, I got a call from my CEO. He sounded amused. "You're going to love this," he said. "Guess who applied to our open strategy consultant position?" I didn't have to guess. Nathan, he chuckled. You think we should bring him in for an interview? Only if you want to lose the rest of your team, I said. We both laughed. He didn't even make it past the first resume filter. Months passed. I grew into my role more deeply than I expected. Led deals I once only dreamed about. Mentored women who reminded me of myself 5 years ago, sharp, underestimated, burning with potential, but afraid to ask for what they were worth. I told them what I wish someone had told me. Don't wait for permission. The people who truly see your value will never ask you to shrink. And the people who don't, they'll call you difficult right up until they're forced to call you boss. The last time I ever heard Nathan's name was in a podcast interview, one of those inside corporate culture episodes where former execs talk about leadership missteps and redemption arcs. They brought him on as a cautionary tale. He tried to sound wise, humbled, like he'd grown from the experience. But even through the headphones, I could hear it, the bitterness, the spin, the way he talked about loyalty, like it was something he'd been owed, not something he'd ever earned. I paused the episode halfway through. I didn't need to hear the rest. His story was over. Mine wasn't. Fro. Now when people ask me how I got to where I am, I tell them the truth. Not the sanitized version. Not the work hard and good things happen fairy tale. I tell them I did work hard, and I got dismissed, undermined, overlooked, until I stopped accepting it. Until I learned that sometimes the most professional thing you can do is burn the bridge they keep walking over you on. I tell them I was never lucky. I was just done being silent. And that's when everything changed. He thought stealing my reward would break me, but all it did was reveal who I already was and hand me the power to never go back. I used to think silence meant survival, that if I worked hard enough, stayed small enough, eventually someone would see me. But all that did was give people like Nathan room to take what I'd earned. The truth is, I didn't rise because they finally recognized me. I rose because I stopped waiting to be chosen. I stopped protecting the people who never protected me. And when the moment came, I didn't need to raise my voice. I just stood up. That was enough. If someone steals your moment, maybe they're just handing you the opening to write a better one.